everyone. Thanks for joining me on another episode of Inspiring Penny. Today I'm so excited to introduce you to Mariah Vargo, my friend, who has a new platform out called Motherhood Unraveled. Mariah, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your Instagram platform and where you want to see it go?
Sure. So my name's Mariah. I am a mom of four and an educator. And Motherhood Unraveled, it actually, honestly, it's kind of like a miracle, especially reflecting back, because it was a dream that I never thought was going to happen. Or it was a dream that I never thought I had the courage to take the leap to start. And so for years, I had been thinking about how I just really see moms struggling and I see kids struggling and motherhood's really hard, and what's a way that we can support people and families as a whole, and then by doing that, when we're holistically wrapping around, we support kids too, because I guess that's the biggest piece I saw as an educator, was just how much kids are struggling. And I was thinking about it, and then I'd be like, okay, but I can't do it because of XYZ, or I think about it for another few months and then come up with another excuse, and it never really happened. And it was so funny because I happened to mention it to my friend Crystal Lang, and I was like, hey, I have this dream and I'm so passionate about it, and this is what I'm thinking. And it was just sharing it with somebody. I never expected anything to come of it. And she took it and she was like, that's so amazing, you could totally do that. And I actually am starting out building my business as a business coach, and I'll take you on as a client and we'll get you started. And so it was so funny because it was almost like it was meant to be. And I truly feel like if it wasn't for her push, I wouldn't have been brave enough to take that leap. And she believed in me in that moment, and that was honestly how it started, and it's kind of spiraled into, it's a platform at this point that I guess seeks to empower and build women up, provide some strategies and encouragement, but also be very realistic in that motherhood isn't what you see on Pinterest all the time. Motherhood isn't somebody's reel on their Instagram story, because that's not the reality of what life is. And reminding people of that, because when we get stuck mindlessly scrolling and all you see is picture perfect moments, it makes you feel like a failure. So that was kind of where it started. And the goal eventually is for it to become a larger space and community for women to come together and just provide that support, and do some teaching on different strategies or things that I've learned. But it's also that communal space where people come together. I don't know everything. I've screwed up. Some of my lessons have come from those screw ups. But other people, that sense of community and that shared, like, oh man, that's really hard.
Well, even for myself, my kids are grown and left home, but I can still relate to that because I struggled, and it was always like, oh, you have to keep your house clean, you have to work full time, and you have to be the best mother, right? And this allows a space for us to recognize that no one's perfect, right? And if we give each other the grace to acknowledge that we have trouble, life would be so much easier.
Yeah. And that's, I guess, the goal, is that people coming together and their shared experience is what builds everybody up. Because we each have something that we can learn from each other, and that's ideally the goal, and that hopefully through that support, instead of moms trying to function in isolation, and struggling in isolation, that it takes away some of that.
Yeah, for sure. I really love the quote. I found one of your posts, and it says, women need other women in their lives who think that they're a big deal. No competition, no backhanded comments, no jealousy or hate. Just, I love you, I support you, and there's no one on earth quite like you. The kind of energy. Like, I love that, because that is how I try and live. Like, trying to support everybody when they're feeling the need, right?
Yeah.
That is really fabulous.
Yeah. And that one actually was one that someone else had, I can't remember who the exact author was, but it was
Yeah.
something that somebody else shared, and I was like, wow, like, how impactful is that? If we can get to a place where it's not a competition. And I know over the past few years, that's one of the parts of my life that I'm the most proud of, is some of the beautiful relationships that I've been able to develop with women, where they are a support. And I remember like being a new mom with Emmett, and like being in the thick of it, and I'm exhausted, and the baby's crying because he was fussy, having a toddler at home, and this was like, we were still in COVID, and being like, oh my goodness, how am I gonna make it? And I remember a girlfriend of mine showing up, and she took my baby and put it in the swing and was like, go have a shower. And she started to do my dishes. And initially, there was a moment of like guilt and shame,
Yes.
and that negative talk of like, oh my god, I can't even keep my own house clean. But when you take a step back from that, and you're like, wow, what a beautiful friend that she knows in this moment that this is what I need. And there's no judgment, there's no criticism, there's nothing. It's just like, here's a way that I can support you right now.
What an amazing world we have if we all gave up that shame. You know, we all immediately think that we're not enough, or, you know, that we just suck, right?
Yeah.
But what an amazing friend. Like, that is truly the best gift that anybody could give somebody else, is just to help.
Yeah. Or even, you know, there are people who sit with you, and it's like they're not there to offer advice, they're not there, like maybe it's you're having issues in your relationship, and they're the friend who it's like they might be super ticked with your partner right now, but they're not going to say that. They're just there to listen and to support you and to sit with you in that moment. I think that those are really truly great friends too. So yeah, that's one of the biggest things too that I've found. It's like, wow, like how rich my life is because of these people. And for a long time, especially when I was a young mom and a single mom at the start of my mothering journey, I didn't have that. And that was partly what made it so hard. Because if I would have had that, I feel like some things maybe would have been a bit different. And it doesn't really help to sit back and think on that and to dwell on that. Well, oh, I wish if I would have had more tools back then, or oh, I wish if I would have done this differently, would it be different now? Because ultimately, again, that's kind of building that guilt and that shame and that beating myself up, and so that's something too to let go. But yeah, guilt and shame are huge. One is the idea that I did something bad, and one of is the idea that I, as a whole, as a person, who I truly am bad. And that's the one that's just really hurtful that we all kind of struggle with too.
How do you deal with your children and the shame and the guilt when you're raising them?
For, like, if they have those
Yes.
feelings, or if I do?
Well, I guess either or. Like, when you're dealing with your kids, how do you deal with that? And then how do they deal when they have it?
For myself, it's an ongoing process.
For sure, me too.
And it's not something that goes away. I think it's something that as you stretch your muscles and you gain more of an awareness, and you can catch yourself and be like, oh, I hear this right now. And catching yourself and asking, would I say this to my child? Would I say this to my best friend? And if the answer is no, why would you say it to yourself? And so that's a key thing when I'm struggling with it. And the other part around it too that I've had to come back to, especially when it comes to feeling guilty of being a working mom, is, like, I know especially it seems like nonstop sickness all the time lately, and so having to take a ton of sick days, or you're at work and then you have to leave work because you've got sick kids, and you know you've got to be home for so many hours symptom free, and there's a ton of guilt. And what I had to finally come back and do was I had to look at my values and what are my values. And some of the main ones revolve around family. And that family value is higher than the work one. And recognizing that, you know what? Yes, I am a part of this team at work. Yes, there are kids and there are families that are counting me, and colleagues counting on me there too. But at the end of the day, my core value that's the highest is the one that has to do with showing up authentically for my family. And reminding myself of that, again, is important. And it doesn't always work, but I find that just that awareness is huge instead of sinking down.
I find society has shifted a little bit towards allowing women to feel like they can take time off with their kids. Because when I first was working, like, oh my God, your child is sick, what are you going to do? You still have that commitment to work, and you end up having to go to work and leaving your sick child with somebody. So I really admire moms now that can stand firm knowing that their families come first, because I lost out on many things in my kids' lives, and I've had to go back and apologize because I felt that I couldn't say no.
Yeah, but realistically, you did the best that you could at that time.
Right.
With the situation and the tools that you had.
Yeah, and I think you're right on that. We all need to give ourselves a break. Like there's things that I wish my parents would have done. I didn't have a great relationship with my dad, but he didn't have a great relationship with his parents, and he could only parent me the way he knew how to deal with me, right?
Yeah.
And it took me a lot of time to figure that out and say, because he passed away when my youngest was born, so he's been gone for 21 years, so I kind of had to give that up, right? And move on with a different kind of relationship.
Yeah, it's super interesting. Sometimes, again, we repeat patterns from how we were raised, but we're not even aware that we're repeating the patterns. And so there is quite a bit of awareness that needs to happen and some unlearning. Because I know typically as a teenager, you're always like, I'm not going to parent the way that you parented me. Like, you're terrible. I'm never going to be a mom like you. And then you become a mom and you're like, oh, shoot.
Yeah.
So in many cases, it's good. But in some cases, you're like, oh, yeah, I didn't like that. Why am I doing that? But it's not even a conscious
No,
thing.
it's just kind of in there.
And so again, that awareness and that really sitting with and thinking about, okay, what do I want this to look like? How can I get to a point where I'm aware that this is happening? If I want it to change, what do I need to do differently? Because that piece of looking at how were we raised and how is that impacting, because a lot of the time I think it's just the default mode. And yeah, and again, like I know I did the podcast that you listened to, and I'll be honest, my mom was quite upset with me after listening to that, because some of the things that I had shared she found hurtful, and it wasn't the intention. And we had to have a conversation saying, Mom, like, you did the best that you could with the tools that you had at that time. Yeah. And, there's
That's hard, though, for her to hear
too.
that, too, right? As a mom, you really just want to be the best you can for your child, and you don't recognize what you're doing.
Yeah. And that's that learning and that growing piece. You had asked in terms of kids, how, helping them. And it's interesting that you asked that, because we've been having our middle child, he's very, very sensitive, and he feels things really deeply. It's kind of like his superpower. It's beautiful. But it also comes with a lot of heartache for him. And he's very hard on himself and has a lot of negative self-talk, and he doubts himself. So even the other day we were working on math, and, he was presented with a question that was hard for him, and his immediate response was to shut down and cry and say, I'm stupid, I can't do this. And it's like, in that moment, it's super funny, because for me as a teacher, I'm sitting there, and, I wouldn't respond how I was thinking in my head to a child at school, but I'm sitting there and I'm like, seriously? Why can't you do this right now? Like, it's not a big deal, like, just, come on, man. Like, why aren't you getting this? Is what's going on in my head. But having to respond in a different way, and access empathy. And so what I found has been helpful for me as the parent in that moment is, can I think back to a time when I was in his shoes? And funnily enough, and why that situation itself was so triggering, I think, for me, was because I used to really struggle with math. Like, math used to make me cry. I hated it. It was horrible. And so it was almost like I was re-seeing my experience from childhood through him, and it was like, oh, this sucks. I'm getting to work through it all over again. But in that moment, it's accessing that peace and sitting with them and being like, you know what, buddy? And validating them and saying, this is really hard for you. I can see it's really hard for you. And I'm really sorry. But you are a very bright young boy. And I believe in you, and I know that you're going to get this. It's just going to take some time and some practice, and we can work through it together. And then offering him a choice. Do you need a break from this right now, or do you want to keep going and Mom will sit with you? And so in that moment, he chose to sit in my lap and do his math. And so, through that way of validating the feelings, but also affirming, you've got this. You're not stupid. I believe in you. Those types of things, I think, they're not going to work immediately. But over time, he's going to start to internalize that message of, oh, hold on, no. I've got this. I'm not stupid. And start to maybe change some of that negative self-talk, and the dialogue will hopefully change.
What I think I like about your platform on Instagram is that you speak about your family and genuinely, authentically, right? And then you put it out to the audience. Because I read that one too. Do you remember when you were 3, 5, 7? It's a really good point, because sometimes we forget what it's like, or being a tween or a teenager. Oh my gosh, I can't imagine what it would be like to go through that during the age of social media.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting, because when I was reflecting back on it, I really sat with it for a bit, and I was like, what did I want? What did I need in those moments? And majority of the time, I just needed my mom. I needed, and even still, like, if I'm having a really hard day, there's a deep desire where it's like, I want my mom so badly to come and to just be like, you know what, it's okay. You're not alone. I wanted to, like, play with my hair.
Right. Like when you're sick, there's nothing better than just, oh, Mom.
Yeah, and like I said there too, it's not that makes it 100% better in that moment, especially if you've got, let's say, a teenager who, like, stole your car and crashed it, or whatever it might be, because the reality is you're still going to have those moments, because teenagers, or I'm just thinking of them in particular, they're at an age where they are pushing boundaries. They're trying to figure out who they are. It's like a toddler, but at a different older stage. They're figuring themselves out, and they're going to make some poor choices. That's life. But how you show up in that moment for them is going to, I think, dictate how they're going to continue to interact with and respond to you, and are they going to continue to come to you in those, oh shoot, I really screwed up moments? Or are you going to essentially turn them away from you? Because some of them we can't prevent. And is their first response to shame them, or immediately be like, okay, you're grounded for life? Because again, what's that teaching? And it's perhaps not always the popular belief or point of view or view of parenting, but it's something that I found works for our family. And there's lots of research coming out too that supports a lot of, I guess, the ways that I choose to parent. And that's part of why is I constantly have this love of learning, and I'm constantly looking for, okay, what can I do? What I'm doing isn't working, so what can I try next? Because I really believe that doing the same thing over and over and over again, if you're not getting the result that you want, or if it's making it worse, why would you keep doing it?
Right.
Part of that drive too comes from our oldest son has some challenges. He has ADHD and oppositional defiance, and so we've got some tough behavior, and so a lot of traditional methods of parenting don't work for him. And it was like, okay, we've got to figure this out. So what can we do? What can we come up with? And so that was kind of what started a lot of the searching and researching and trying to figure out, okay, what's a better way? But yeah.
I know I saw a post that you had the sensory bins,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I also have a son with ADHD, and like, what a fabulous idea, like, to give them something else to do, to touch, to, and keep them busy when you do need a little bit of time to do something else and they're not willing to.
Yeah, and it's actually funny because lots of times those are used with young children because they help with language and, you know, skill development and concepts, and depending on how they're worked, fine motor and all sorts of things. But anytime a younger kids are playing with it, the older ones are too. And it's still a benefit for them in helping to regulate. So it is neat.
Cool. So where do you want your platform to go from here? Like, what would you like, you know, in 3-5 years, what would you like to see? What's your vision, Mariah?
It's so tough. Ideally, my goal is to get to a point where I have a functioning website and can offer online courses, or, you know, run groups that way, and have almost like the adult component, but then the kids one too, and do that, and just continue to build that community. It's quite small still, but again, you know, in terms of numbers, it might be small in comparison if you go into the comparison game. But I know I was sitting and I was looking at it today and I was like, wow. Because I used to sit here, and the reason that I was so scared to take this jump was I didn't believe that I had anything of value to offer. And I was like, why would anybody listen to me? Why? And it's been so crazy because it's like the amount of messages that I get, or comments, or even this, it's like, wow, I have something to offer. And that's so beautiful.
100%. I mean, for me and doing my YouTube channel, you know, I'm not trying to be famous. I'm not trying to be the next Oprah. I just want to showcase my love for the people around me and those people I admire. And you know, for you, starting small, you're going to find your group of people and those who find value, right? And those are the stories we need to hold on to.
Yeah.
So really good for you.
Yeah.
Like, that's really awesome.
Yeah, I'm excited.
You were a guest on a podcast not that long ago on the barnyard language.
Yeah.
How did these ladies find you?
It was super funny, but again, it's kind of like one of those things where it's like, I guess it was meant to be. They, I think, just found me on Instagram, and the one lady happened to join one of the challenges that I was offering. It was like a very brief program, and did it for the week, and loved it, and thought it was really impactful. And so, she had spoken to her podcast co-host and was like, hey, I think we should have this person on. And they sent me a message, and it was like, holy cow. And so that was kind of how that happened, and it was like super early on in the journey of motherhood unraveled, and it was just crazy, and it was so much fun. I
listened to that, and now, like, those ladies are a hoot.
Yeah.
Like, it was really good.
Yeah, and again, it was a beautiful opportunity because we still all stay in touch.
Oh.
And so it's a piece of it's like, you know, not that long ago we were talking, and it was like, how are you? Like, really, how are you? And they shared. And it was an authentic, meaningful, beautiful interaction that developed with people I have not ever physically met. I've seen them on a Zoom screen.
Mm-hmm. But,
you know, there was an opportunity there and a connection that was built through this sense of community, through the one that they have and through the one that I have. And it's been beautiful because it's a friendship now.
Right.
Yeah.
That is really amazing. Yeah. I really enjoyed it. I don't know. I don't know.
Thank you.
And just laughing at those two ladies, like, you know, they're truly authentic, right?
Yeah, they are. There was moments where I was like, oh boy, we're out there. Like, we're dropping the F-bombs. Like, yep. It was a legit thing that was happening.
And that's how you make connection with people, is just be yourself, right? You don't need to, you know, pretend that you're somebody else to make connections.
Yeah.
Yes. I've seen more and more burnout with people in the workplaces, even myself, you know, through COVID. We had a cyber incident at work. How does one deal with burnout? Or how do you see the signs?
So I personally am going through this right now. I've been off work since October. And it's one of those things where you might recognize the signs, or maybe you don't. If you recognize them, it's almost like you're too stubborn to listen to them. At least that's what happened with me. And I think it can look different for different people. In my situation, and it was super embarrassing and I didn't want to admit it, but my memory was like tanking. Like, I missed a meeting and I was a chair of that committee and I didn't even remember there was a meeting. And I was like, oh my goodness, like, how can you do that? But so my short-term memory was tanking. I was really irritable. Like, I just was really struggling to regulate. Just grouchy. Some people might have a lower patience. Some people might experience a lot of physical symptoms. In my case, how that presented for me was vertigo, excessive sweating, I was breaking out rashes, joint pain. There's something else that I can't remember, but it was really starting to physically get to me. To the point that I was going to the naturopath and was like, hey, like, I've got all these symptoms, we got to get this figured out. I don't want to be taking a bunch of pills, like, please help me. Yeah. Because I know that this is stress. I have enough awareness that I know that this is stress, so I need help. Mm-hmm. Because I can't change. In my head at that time, I was saying, I can't change what is causing me stress right now, which is my job. There's not a lot there I can control. Some people too, difficulty concentrating, so it's really starting to impact your work performance. You might be making mistakes, depending on what job you're in. Maybe you're getting sick more often. It all depends on the person, but for me, the physical symptoms, the memory, the difficulty concentrating, and the irritability, those were the big pieces for me. And I could see it, and I knew I was getting somewhere that was not good, but I also was holding myself hostage, because it's like, okay, Mariah, what else are you supposed to do about it? And it was like, what do you have control over in this moment that is going to make a change? And at that time, I had convinced myself that there wasn't a lot, because I refused to set boundaries at work, which was on me. And as a teacher, it's kind of difficult, because if somebody comes to you, if a colleague comes to you and is like, hey, can you be on this committee? Or, hey, can we plan this event? Or, hey, can you do this supervision? And you know it's directly going to benefit the kids, the chances of saying no are slim. Yeah. So you take on more, and you take on more meetings, and you take on more responsibility, even though you don't have the capacity for the job that you should be doing. And then you add on an education, at least in this area, trying to get subs is slim to none. So lots of the schools are functioning short-staffed, where you're having to cover internally, and that's hard. So yeah, the not setting boundaries, because that would be something that you should do, is set boundaries. These are what my capacity is. This is what I can do. I can't do that right now. No, I'm sorry. Somebody else will have to. Things like that. I didn't do that. I just kept taking on more. That, you know, and I think without that awareness, it's kind of like you're the train that's speeding up and speeding up and speeding up, and eventually, kaboom. And unfortunately, with me, that's what happened. And I knew it was coming, and even in September, I had sat back and was like, I need to figure out a way to manage my stress. I am literally taking like 6 different naturopathic medicines from the naturopathic doctor to try and manage the symptoms. That's not okay.
Right, you're just kind of putting a Band-Aid
I'm
over it.
Band-Aid fixing it, and it's like, I need to get at the root cause. I need to deal with the stress. And so went into September and was doing a challenge, because I was like, okay, like, a community of people is going to help hold me accountable, and it also might benefit other people. And so assessed what do I need to do, which area of my life is most impacted by stress, scored it. Work was a big one, but guess which one I chose? I didn't choose that one. I chose physical health, which was ridiculous. But in my head, it was like, I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah.
So was doing all the things, getting enough sleep, drinking lots of water, going for counseling every 2 weeks, connecting with friends, eating healthy, moving my body, thinking. Research says this is what you need to do. This will help you decrease your stress. And then I had an incident happen at work where I got hurt. And it was just a situation of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I got kicked a couple times in the stomach, wound up being obviously upset. And it wasn't that student's fault. It was just the wrong place at the wrong time.
Right.
And went home, cried, went to bed, slept it off, didn't go to the doctor, got up the next morning, went to work, because I have colleagues that are counting on me. We're short.
Yep.
I have kids that are counting on me. They need me. Let alone I needed me, but it didn't matter. And wound up going to work, and thankfully I had colleagues there who were like, what the heck are you doing here? You need to go home. And so I had a very forceful conversation with two colleagues who were like, this is not acceptable. You've been hurt. You've experienced something traumatic. You need to go to a doctor, and you need to take some time. Which was the breaking point for me. And in that moment, because it was too far gone and I didn't catch it sooner and I didn't listen to myself, because I knew I was struggling and I didn't listen. And I think a lot of people, it's probably the same thing where you just keep pushing and pushing and pushing and
100%.
pushing until you can't push anymore. And in that moment though, all that I could think of was, I'm a failure.
I'm a right to shame right away.
I'm a failure. I'm letting my colleagues down. I'm letting my kids down. This isn't fair. Why am I the first one to crack? I'm the weakest person here. You name it, I went through it. I beat myself up terribly, to the point that I sat there for days after and was like, is this a big deal? Is this not a big deal? I don't really know. Because I didn't actually believe that what happened to me was that big of a deal. And I honestly thought that I was just a weak person because I got sent home from work. And I wound up going to the doctor, could barely even articulate to the doctor what had happened to me. And, ran through some tests, had blood work done, urine done, ultrasound, x-ray, whatever done. Your kidneys are bruised. You need to rest. And it was kind of like the oh shoot moment. I didn't make this up, because for a while I was like, is this in my head? Did I actually make this up?
Right.
I don't know. Like, I actually doubted my reality was the point that I was at in the burnout. And and then for the first period of time after, probably for the first couple weeks, all I felt was anger. I just felt so angry.
Angry at not being able to go to work, or angry at feeling shame?
I was angry at myself that I let it get to that point. I was angry with my work because there had been a couple times where I tried to articulate, I'm overwhelmed. There's too much. I need help. And nobody really listened to me, because Mariah just kept showing up. Mariah just kept taking on more. So Mariah's got it. She's fine.
She's Superwoman.
Yeah. And you're fine until you break. And so I was angry. And for a while, that's okay. But then I had to look at, okay, how did you contribute to that? what could you have done differently? And the reality is that I didn't set boundaries. And I have to own that. Yeah, and so that was the big thing. And then I was just angry too with the system and the state of things, and that this was the point that we're at. Because the reality is that I know a ton of teachers. And I can only speak about teachers because that's the job that I'm in. And that's the experience I'm in, and that's what I see. But I know a ton of teachers who struggle with anxiety. And I know a ton of teachers who don't teach anymore because their mental health was so significantly impacted they couldn't do it. And it's hard to sit back and think, when is it going to get to a place where people sit back and go, okay, what's the common factor here? Why is it that there's a staff that has a ton of people with significant anxiety? Why is it that people have to take medication just to go to work? And that's the part where I'm at too, where I'm like, do I need medication just to go to work? Because at this point I haven't. I've been pretty firm that I need to figure this out. I need to deal with the root cause. I need to get some better coping strategies. We need to work this out, because medicating myself just so that I can go to my workplace, at least for me, I don't think is acceptable. And medication serves a purpose, and medication is helpful and dependent on the person. That's fantastic. It's just a decision that I've made at this time, because I'm like, I shouldn't have to medicate just to function in my job. And at this point, or at that point, the only way I think I would have been able to function is if I medicated myself beyond oblivion, and then what kind of, am I even there anymore? I don't know, because I would have been so sedated. But
so where are you gonna go from here? Take some time off and...
Yeah, it's more so a piece of, I guess, taking a leave and to heal and to deal with the trauma that happened, because it's been very impactful, and it's the first time in my life where I'm actually having to sit with something, and instead of avoiding it, and instead of keep pushing, and instead of numbing out or distracting or whatever it might be, it's like, no, you gotta sit with it.
You gotta unpack it.
You've gotta unpack it. You've gotta learn from this. We've gotta learn how we can cope so that this doesn't happen again.
And I think that's what a lot of people do, is we numb, right? It's easy to watch, let's binge a series on Netflix and not think about what's really the root cause of what's going on in our lives, or, whatever binge thing that we do. I used to play Candy Crush for hours, so I didn't have to think about what was my issue, right? Finally deleted that off my phone. It's gone, because it was a problem. You can ask my family. But yeah.
Well, and I wanted to ask you what your experience has been like with burnout, and with your job specifically in working with and managing others. So from that side, but then also yourself individually.
I struggle with trying to be there for everyone and trying to give a piece of myself to each of my team. So I'm not very good at this. It's a daily struggle for me. COVID, really hit hard, and my husband got diagnosed with MS, and then had to do it was like a chemo treatment, and I had to stay home for a little while. And I'm an introvert, and then I suddenly realized I need people. I'm a social introvert, so that was really difficult. I find that on a whole, people are tired. And that's why my family really encourages me to do this YouTube channel, because it's something I look forward to, right? Like even this morning when I woke up, I'm like, oh, I get to sit with Mariah and pick her brain, or I get to sit with someone else and understand why they do what they do, right? That's what drives me. So I do enjoy my job, but this is my passion, right? So I look for things that give me passion. I started a book club here at the library for leaders, and we just read Big Magic by Elizabeth, oh my goodness.
Gilbert.
Thank you, lost her name. And after reading that book, I started doing poetry.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And so it was something I never thought I could do, right?
Yeah.
And I just gave myself permission to make mistakes and to go with it, right? And that's why when you said you gave yourself like, yeah, okay, I'm going to do this, like, wow, that was so impactful for me to hear that you gave yourself permission to be who you are.
Yeah.
And that's why I just want to encourage everybody. You know, there are people out there that are probably the best painters or the best authors, but they never give themselves the chance.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's super interesting because a passion actually helps to prevent burnout. And finding something, especially creative, studies are showing that it does help. It's a really key piece in kind of preventing that and that creative outlet. And so you came across that all on your own, but that's fantastic, because for some people too, there's so much fear around, well, what if I produce something bad? And it's not about what if I produce something bad. It's like you just need to produce something, period. And it's not about for other people. It's maybe just painting for yourself or poetry for yourself. It doesn't have to be consumable necessarily for other people to be determined if it's successful or not.
You don't need it published. It's just in a journal, right? Yeah. No, that's really good. I'm actually thinking about doing a once a month, doing an event here at the library where you can bring any project that you're working on.
Okay.
And just be surrounded by like-minded people that want to create. And so that's something that I want to start in probably February or March, you know, and just encourage others to be creative.
Well, and it kind of holds people accountable too, because sometimes those pieces, it's very easy to dismiss or say that you don't have time for those things. But yeah, no, that's super cool. There's a book too called like Unicorn Space, I think is what it is, and it actually has to do specifically with women carving out this unicorn space to pursue areas of passion and creativity for them, and it's just their time and how to make that work within your life. So it's basically that.
Honestly, I'm going to have to find that book. That's fabulous.
I do a lot of reading.
I really enjoy learning. Like when somebody says, like at work, do you want to take another class? Yes, sign me up, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what,
Yeah, that's actually, I'm taking a class right now, and it's kind of madness. But I had started applying into a master's program, I think it was last year, and then realized I was missing a prerequisite class.
Oh.
So then I just didn't finish my application. Obviously didn't get in, and it was like, yeah, that's probably for the best. I was sitting here, and this whole thing happened with work and just the current state of education in general, and I'm like, I don't think I want to teach anymore. I don't feel like I'm making an impact. I don't feel like what I'm doing is making a difference. I don't know if you want to call it an existential crisis, but I was like, nothing I'm doing is of value. And I was like, I think I really need to go back, and I want to become a psychologist so that I can better support kids that way and families. And was sitting here, and it was like, okay, we got to figure this out. But I didn't even have the capacity when I went off work to look it up. It was like, I don't even have the capacity to figure this out right now. Like, I don't have the capacity to Google this. I just can't do it. And so finally looked it up, and it was like, okay, to apply into this program, to start next fall, you have to have your prerequisite course done, plus your entire master's application. Plus, so you got to have this course done, this full university course done, your master's application done with all your references, all your letters. You have to have it done by February 1st. And this was in December. And I was like, oh yeah, that's cool. So I called the lady at the registrar's office, and I was like, this is what I want to do. And she's like, well, you've missed the deadline to start this course in December. So you're going to be starting it in January. There's no way humanly possible that you can complete this course and have it marked before February 1st. But guess what I did? I registered for the course. I was like, well, I'm going to get the textbook right away. This course is online. Hypothetically, I'm sitting at home. I can do it. So that's the journey that we're on, is we are trying to finish an entire university course in a month so that we can apply to a master's course. So,
wow, good for you.
But it's good. Probably, again, not the smartest decision I've ever made. It's probably, well, it 100% is a little bit more of a form of avoidance of having to sit with things a little bit. But it at least is taking me closer to that goal.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I'm about halfway done. We might not make it, but I'm hopeful.
That's amazing, because when we met that one day for coffee, like, the knowledge that you have is incredible. Like, on how the brain works, and how, like, I was blown away. And I'm like, you've got to do more than just teach. Like, yeah, you need a more hands-on and how to impact parents and help them with their children and their journey, right? So
yeah, and I think that's the biggest passion of mine, is I just want to help kids and I want to help families. And the nature of what my job is right now, I just can't do it in the way that kids need. There's just not enough time, and there's not enough resources, and there's not enough support right now. And so it's figuring out a way of, okay, what can I do differently? Because what I'm doing isn't working.
well, I can't wait to follow you on this journey.
Well, thank you.
And yeah, keep posting.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was really, I think one of the things that was really hard for me too when all this happened was, it's like, how do I show up on that platform? How do I show up when I'm literally at the lowest of low right now? Because everything that was integral to who I thought I was, or who I saw I was as a person, is now gone. At least for now. What do I have left? Was essentially what I was left sitting there with, because in my head, I strongly identified with being an educator. That was my passion, that was my purpose. I was working with kids. I don't have that anymore. It was taken away. I mean, I made the choice, but that moment that I was told, you need to go home, you need to take some time, it was gone. So I don't have that. I'm still a mom, but that piece of, this is who you are, it was gone. And thankfully, because it was really freaking hard, and I was sitting back and it was like, how do I show up? Because I'm ashamed. Mm-hmm. I failed. In my head, I failed. How do I show up and inspire other women when I'm really struggling? And I feel really broken right now. And I got hurt. How can I support people and encourage them to show up the way that I do when this happened? And I had to remind myself, I couldn't control everything in that situation.
But I think you've done an amazing job showing up as you are that day on the platform and saying, you know what, you honestly just put yourself out there and say, I'm not perfect. Help me. Tell me your ideas on how to do this, you know, and I think that's amazing by just saying, I'm struggling. You're giving you're giving thousands of women permission to say, you know what, I'm struggling too.
Yeah. Well, and again, you can't expect vulnerability from others if you won't be vulnerable yourself. And I had to remember too, what do I have of value? And someone, I had taken a course once, and someone had asked, one of the questions was, if everything that you have is taken away, if your family is taken away, if your job is taken away, if all of your material things are taken away, what do you have left? And you have to sit with that. What do you have left? I have my intelligence. I have my compassion. I have my kind heart. I can still access empathy. I have all of these things. And that's ultimately, in those moments where I felt like I was broken, that's what I had to come back to. So I'm going to ask you, just out of curiosity, the same question. If everything that you had was taken away, what would you have left?
I have the ability to find joy where there isn't joy. To find beauty. I don't know if it's because when I turned 50, I had I wouldn't say nervous breakdown or just a like, oh my God, life is short. I now will stop the vehicle on my way to work when I see a beautiful cloud or a beautiful sunrise, the moon. That brings me joy.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and yeah, I think that's what I would still have left.
I think there's probably a lot more too.
Oh,
You have to think on it.
yeah, I'll have to sit with that.
Sorry for putting you on the spot.
No, that's good. I don't mind. I would just like to thank Mariah for joining us on this episode of Inspiring Penny. In the description, we're going to put Mariah's Motherhood Unraveled Instagram link. So please go give her a look. Subscribe. Is that what we do on Instagram? Or we follow? We follow.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to get this lingo right.
You and I both.
Yeah. You know, we're not the techie people. And if you enjoyed our episode, please give us a like and a follow. No? A like and a subscribe. There we go. A subscribe. Anyway, I really enjoy getting to know each person that I interview. I just want to thank the Kipling Regional Library again for letting me use the facilities to interview. Anyway, have a great day, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Bye.
Bye-bye.